Refutation. So when another team or another debater says something, you have three basic choices. And they aren't really choices. The first thing you can do is just accept whatever they say. You can accept what the other team says. You can just get up and be like, sure, we agree, whatever they say, that's cool. The second option is to reject what they have to say. You can reject what they're saying and you say, no, what they say the sky is blue, we say the sky is not blue, or we say the sky is green, or something like that. The third thing you can do is ignore what they say. But ignoring it is effectively accepting what they've said. Because if you don't reply to what your opponent says in a debate round, then effectively you're just saying whatever they say goes. So really the best choice is to oppose or reject whatever the other team is saying. You don't want to be in a situation where you're ignoring what the other team says. You don't want to be in a situation where you're just accepting it. In a debate round, obviously the goal is to have clash, and you're not going to get clash without getting up and opposing what they're saying. And so we're rejecting what our opponents say. So that's what we're going to talk about with refutation. Refutation is how we address the arguments that somebody else makes against what we say, or how we oppose what they say, even if we haven't said anything yet. Later we'll talk about how to actually try to reply to things that people say when they actually refute what we've said. That's a different lecture for a different time, even though a lot of these techniques apply even if we're just talking about how we address an argument someone else makes. So there's two different types of attacks that we can use. The two different types of attacks that we can use. The two types of attacks that we have are weighing and turning. So we can weigh arguments and we can turn arguments. So weighing is comparing claims. To weigh something means you're comparing the different claims. And so this is where you're trying to say, my claim is superior to their claim, and you're trying to provide reasons. So if they say the sky is blue because I saw it that way, but then you get up and you say the sky is green because these 100 scientists say it's green. That's how you're comparing the two things. You're weighing. How do you do this? The first way is through evidence. You can have, first of all, empirics versus theoretical arguments. Empirics. Empirical evidence. Whoops, empirics with an I. So empirics is effectively some sort of study. This is research. So an empirical study might say that we've tested whether or not this car can stop in 50 feet 100 times, and 49 out of 50 times it stops in 50 feet. And if you say, well, in my experience personally, cars just can't stop in 50 feet. Well, congratulations, you've got an interesting experience, but all these tests are empirical evidence. That's going to outweigh the argument. You can counter evidence if someone doesn't just try to say in theory, so someone instead of maybe in this world talks about treating illegal drugs as public health and they say that that's a really good thing because people are happier that way. But then you get up and you say, well, actually, people in the criminal justice system are really happy. There's this psychological study that shows that people in the criminal justice system are actually really happy, and maybe people who are getting treated in the hospital aren't happy at all. And so maybe if the whole argument is just they think you would be happier if you weren't in jail, but you have this study that says they weren't, you're using empirics. If, however, they have one study that says people are happier or people live longer when they're treated as public health, then the only way you're going to counter that is through better evidence. You can't have just your opinion against a credible source of evidence, so you have to have better evidence. And so this might mean that their research is from a couple of high school teachers who did a study among their students, and yours is from a group of professors at Tulane or at Harvard, or maybe it's they've got a study from Harvard and you have a study from Yale, and you try to say, here's why my Yale people are better than the Harvard people. And so you're trying to show how your evidence is better than the other people's evidence. And that's a really important thing to be able to do, because often you're going to be having competing arguments. You're going to have one person that says that treating it as criminal justice does in fact reduce the level of drug use in the United States, and another study that says treating it as public health reduces the level of drug use in the United States. Well, those two things can't both automatically be true together, especially for purposes of this debate, and so you need to be able to show why your piece of evidence is more useful in this round, why the empirics are stronger on your side than on the other side. The next thing you can talk about is logical missteps. one way you can weigh a claim is to show that there are logical missteps that your opponent is taking in order to get to the conclusion that they are ultimately claiming. So, for example, in our resolution about illegal drugs, if they were to say something like, people who are in the public health system are treated by people who are trained to deal with their specific diagnosis, so they're abusing drugs. And when people are treated by individuals, only people who are treated by those who are trained in that field are able to be cured. Well, maybe there's a misstep there, that there are some people who are cured without being trained by somebody who's professional in that field. And so then you're going to point that out. And so you're going to say, look, there's a logical misstep. There's an assumption that you're making. Maybe your piece of evidence talks about how the people in public health are better able to cure people from their addiction, but then their ultimate claim is that those are the only people. And you say, well, your evidence says that they're better at it, but just because they're better at it doesn't mean you can make the next step that they're the only people able to do it. And so you're going to show how there's logical errors made by your opponent. The next thing you can talk about are missing warrants. Missing warrants. So this is the evidence or some sort of support. So when we talked about our three pieces of an argument, we talked about claim, warrant, and impact. And so if there's no warrant, if there's no reason to believe the claim made, then that's a good reason to refute. That's a way to refute your opponent's argument. You say, look, this isn't true in this situation. This isn't going to actually be factual because we don't have anybody who says that this is true. So let's say they just read the resolution and they say public health is always superior to criminal justice, but they don't read any evidence and they say, therefore the resolution is true. You say, well, interesting, you think that, but we don't have any evidence and there's missing warrants, and so that's a reason to refute, to reject the claim the other side made. Next thing you can say is it's not comparative. Not comparative. And this is saying that there's no demonstration of how the resolution is better on the side claimed. So if someone were to read a piece of evidence or make an argument in our drug resolution, and they talked about how the criminal justice system creates lots of lifelong criminals, but there's nothing in the round about criminality. So their value is talking about maybe human life and all these other things, and they never link their value to the argument they're making, and they never link the resolution to the argument they're making, then the reality is there's no comparison. You aren't saying, look, public health is preferable to criminal justice. You're just saying criminal justice is good. Well, we could all agree, maybe criminal justice is really good, but criminal justice being a really good way to stop people from drunk driving or from speeding or from murdering people isn't talking about the abuse of illegal drugs. It's talking about some other type of law enforcement. Maybe the criminal justice system does a great job of preventing people from stealing from other people. But that's not what the resolution is talking about. So you just say, look, we can't compare these two things together. Finally, you can show the insignificance of your opposition. The insignificance. And so the insignificance of your opposition is basically pointing out how even if what they're saying is true, so let's say they talk about how there's these 5 individuals who public health would be better for them than criminal justice. But this is such a small group of people, given the millions of people who are abusing illegal drugs, you would say just because there's 5 anecdotes of how this is a good thing, it's just insignificant. This is so small in magnitude considering how much we're talking about here with the entire abuse of illegal drugs, because this is a general statement. This has to apply across the board. It doesn't just have to apply to these few individuals. And so we're going to say, look, it's not a significant opposition to the resolution. This isn't significant support of the resolution. This is just an insignificant little piece of the story. Maybe it's true, but it doesn't necessarily mean the argument should weigh in their favor. So that's the first way that we can attack an argument. The second thing we can do is turn. And turning is conceding part of the argument, but show how the impact supports you. So you concede part, but show how the impact supports you. And the objective here is that you say, what you're saying here is that, sure, maybe public health does work for a few people, but because my value is the United States economy being strong, the fact that public health costs so much more money, if it does, might say that, sure, it's valuable, but I can turn this and I say, yes, you're right, it does help a few people, but because it only helps a few people at this massive cost, the criminal justice system is actually preferable. And so what you're doing when you're turning is you're basically kind of giving a little bit of rope so that your opponent has a chance to then hang themselves. Instead of you hanging them, you're basically saying, you're right, 1 plus 1 does equal 2, but we're not talking about basic math, we're talking about calculus. And so, yes, you're right that that is 2, but you're not looking at the math the right way, and so we win. And so that's what a turn does. So there's 2 different types of turns we're going to do.